Well, hey, welcome to the Beyond Sundays podcast. I am your host, Brett Stewart, and today my co-host is Jeffrey Turner.
Hey, everybody.
How's it going? We have a great podcast today. We got to sit down with Kristen West. She's someone that is part of our church body, part of our young adults ministry, and really just a crazy life. We honestly could have probably sat down with her for hours.
We could have talked to Kristen for a long time.
Hours about her life, her work in the mission field, and now what God is doing through her.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is the first, one of these. We released our intro episode, but this is the first, real Beyond Sundays that we're doing. So I'm excited about it. And Kristen was a great first guest to have on because her story is incredible, and taking what she's learned all over the world in the mission field and applying that in, Podunk, Abilene, Texas it's just cool. It's exciting. It was a fun conversation.
I love how anytime you reference Abilene, you always have to say Podunk.
Dude, I drove past our North Campus this morning and saw just a whole herd of cows that were being watered by the sprinklers that were watering the field. And this is just, I love it. It's our city, but...
That's funny. But that's not everywhere in our city. Dude, it just happens to be where you drive.
In the last year, have you seen a horse on 8384?
Yes, I have.
Okay, there you go. The point, that is exactly what I was trying to say.
Anyway,
we are Podunk, and I love it.
Okay. Well, yeah, Kristen's story is incredible, and even just you'll hear it towards the end about just how the Lord is revealing his presence to her, what he's called her to, and what her worship, what her sacrifice looks like to him, no matter where she's at, what role she's in. So definitely a powerful one that we have for you today. We're excited for you to hear it. So I think we'll just jump into our conversation with Kristen. Okay, so today we have Kristen West with us. Kristen, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Before we jump into who Kristen is.
Oh, no. What is Jeff going to do?
Kristen is the person you want in the room if you're ever preaching.
If you're ever preaching or leading worship.
Absolute best.
If you're even leading a prayer on stage or you have to read scripture, literally.
One time I had gotten into a pretty insecure place in my preaching, and I asked Kristen to come to a service so that she could respond while I was preaching because it made me so excited to be preaching. So that's just now Kristen, tell us who you are. But that is the background.
I agree with that.
For all that.
I'm a little mad that she's at our other campus from where I am.
From where you usually are.
But I know if and when she's at South, I can hear her.
You always know.
You can hear me
anywhere. Okay, so tell us who you are, what have you done, what are you doing now, and that's going to kind of weave into the podcast today. Why don't we have you here?
Okay, so my name's Kristen West. I'm originally from the San Antonio area. I grew up in New Braunfels, Texas, which is probably why I talk back more to the preacher, because I grew up in a real diverse church down there.
Seriously, if you don't do the talk back, you should start doing it more.
And so
Kristen's going to give classes Sundays.
Honestly, a master class.
Master class
on
responding to the preacher.
Yeah, so I became a believer when I was really young. I got saved when I was 5 and then rededicated my life to the Lord when I was 12 years old. And I knew at that point that it was all in or all out. And so I
knew that at 12.
Yeah.
That's intense.
At 12, Brett and I did not know that.
I was about to say,
we knew different things.
I don't want to even recount what I knew or what I was doing at 12.
Yeah. Somehow I got a book about martyrdom at 12. And I know that sounds really intense. I'm aware that it's a very intense story, but it was one of those Jesus freak books.
Like Fox's Book of Martyrs, but the Jesus freak version of it. I actually had that book.
Yeah.
Brown cover.
Yep. And it had the torn, ripped pages on the side. And I read that and I was like, I would want to do that.
Wow.
I would want to give my life for the Lord. And so I just went for it. And I went on my first missions trip when I was in 7th grade and then again in 8th grade. And on my 8th grade missions trip, I felt like the Lord told me I was going to be a missionary. And so everything that I did from that point was geared towards equipping myself to be a missionary. And so I took Spanish classes really seriously in high school so that I could speak Spanish and not have to use a translator if I moved to Mexico to be a missionary. Those kind of thoughts were what I grew up
What would your parents
thinking.
and what would your family think about as a 7th grader is to 8th grader, I guess, is telling them I want to be a
Yeah, I'm
missionary.
gonna go on the mission
and I'm reading
field.
a book about martyrdom.
I don't think that my mom realized the extent of what she was giving me in my reading when I asked for the book on
So
martyrdom.
she gave it to you. She knew.
I mean, she knew. I mean, I didn't have money. I was 12, so she bought it. I mean, she bought that one in a missionary book,
Wow.
and my
That's cool though.
Yeah. So my dad grew up in a believing family, and my grandma on that side had wanted to do missions at one point, and then my mom is a believer and loves the Lord, and so I think that I don't think they had a grid for what missions really looked like, and I don't think I had a grid for what that looked like either. But I knew that I was going to do whatever the Lord asked, and so. They were very, very accepting of it and very supportive. I remember because my whole plan was to go to YWAM for 6 months, and
What's
then
YWAM for those who don't know?
YWAM is Youth with a Mission, and
After graduating high school?
After graduating high school, I was going to go do a DTS with them, which is at their discipleship training school. And then I would go back and go to some Christian college. And obviously I'd meet my husband there and then get married. And then that was my plan was I would be a youth pastor's wife and we'd do missions trips on the summer. That was my life goal. I was middle schooler. And then my sophomore year of high school, I felt like the Lord told me if I went to college, it was a safety net. And he said, "Do you need a safety net with me?"
Wow.
And I cried. I said, "No, I don't." But my parents were really big advocates for college. And so I was terrified to tell them that I didn't want to go to college, that I wanted to go straight on the mission field. And I sat down and I was sobbing while I was trying to tell them what I needed to tell them. They probably thought I was pregnant or something. Honestly, they probably were
their minds are going a way different place than I feel like God's telling me to go into the mission field.
I just need to talk to you. And they're like, "Okay." And I was like, I want to go just straight on the mission field. I think the Lord told me not to go to college. And they were like, "Well, we believe you hear the Lord and we bless you in that." And they prayed for me and they were like, "Okay, so what do we need to equip you to do to be a missionary?" And so
as a parent now, that feels terrifying. Praying those prayers that you want your kids, when we put the girls to bed every night, we pray that they would go and change the world. And I fully know that prayer terrifies me. And so for that to be you in middle or in high school and telling your parents, I really want to do this, and their response not being fear, I'm sure they felt it. I don't know if y'all have talked about it ever since then, but they had to be terrified at the thought of sending you into the mission field.
Yeah.
It just would be that response is so.
Jeffrey,
just
how old's
what you want?
How old's your oldest?
10.
10.
So
Yeah,
10,
about to be middle school.
Yeah, about to hit middle school,
and so it'd be like her in a year or two.
Yeah, starting to say
Can
she
you
wants to
believe
be a missionary. And
man, I also think maybe we should have your parents here to talk to them because, my gosh,
you just call them, put them on speaker for now. That wouldn't be great.
That would be an interesting conversation to hear from their perspective.
Yeah.
So
I will say I change up how I tell my parents things now because I think my mom realizes the severity of what I mean. So I have to prep her a little bit more.
Yeah. Give a little lead time.
Yeah, because she normally just cries. She's very excited about it if I decide to go back on the mission field or something, but she definitely.
So you graduated high school. Mm-hmm. Straight into the mission field?
Yes. So I ended up going the route of Iris Global, which is an organization based out of Mozambique, Africa, that Heidi Baker and Roland Baker started. And I had a mentor when I was in high school give me Heidi's Compelled by Love book for my 16th birthday.
It's a good book.
It's a great book. I highly suggest reading it. It's going to wreck you in the best way, but it's really great. And I looked up one day if she had a training school because I really felt like the Lord said YWAM wasn't the route for me to go. And so I ended up going to Pemba, Mozambique at 18 for 3 months to do their training school. And then from there, I had every desire to go straight on the mission field and had all these big dreams, but the Lord is a lot wiser than I am. And he had me work at the San Antonio airport with Alaska Airlines for 2 years before I was released to go full-time on the mission field. Wow. So then when I was 21, I went full-time on the mission field to Mozambique.
You are how old now? I know that's not a question you ask a woman,
okay.
but
I'm 26 now.
There you go. Okay. So you went at 21, and then you went pretty full-time for
How many years were
4
you
years?
on the field, and what
Basically.
was, I guess, the longest stint that you were in?
So I
Mozambique?
did a year and a half in Dondo, Mozambique. And then from there, the Lord asked me to move to Abilene, Texas, to do disaster relief ministry or disaster relief missions with Iris Global here in
Wow.
Abilene. And so I did that for a little over a year and a half as well. So 3 years full-time missions.
Yeah.
So you and I have had a lot of discussions about missions and like
Yes.
the philosophy of missions in general. Because you're coming off the field and you feel like God had told you to be a missionary, and you're coming to Abilene, and you're looking at the 3 religious universities and everyone with a sticker of a church on their car, still feeling like you're called to the mission field, but knowing that for a season this mission field is here. And like, explain a little bit about that mindset and how you had to shift it, but how it's the same and different all at the same time.
Yeah. So the slogan, I don't know if that's what you would call it, of Iris Global is that love looks like something and then to stop for the one. And so I think because that was kind of drilled into us in the schooling and when I was on the field, I think that for me, missions isn't so much the programming of it all, but it's just living more missionally where
Yeah,
you're
that's good.
constantly looking for who you can serve and who you can love, whether it's the waitress at the restaurant that you're at or if it's, the person in front of you in the grocery store line, like whatever it looks like, your neighbor love looks like something tangible. And so I think for me, I had to really shift my perspective because I did get a lot of identity from the program and from the title of missionary and from doing it overseas and having all of those stories.
Yeah, because you've rushed into the darkest of dark of times. I mean, you've been
Yeah.
into places that have just experienced huge loss and that are under intense persecution, and then, I mean, that shift would feel drastic, I think, at a level coming from that being your everyday to then here being your everyday.
Yeah, Jeffrey and I have talked about it a lot because I had a really hard time coming off the mission field because it felt very mundane and like pointless to be here and to do the things that I've been doing, even though I know that's not true and I know that that's a lie, but it just feels that way. And so I think that, even it's still a process. It's still something that I have to tell myself that the right now is just as important as whatever it looks like to be quote unquote like a missionary and like to go back on the mission field. And I think that, if I'm honest, I think that I had made that an idol in my life. And so the Lord is even still, like even yesterday I had a time with the Lord where he was like, no, like I've called you to Abilene and it's good. And your only calling in life is to love me. And that you can love me just as well in Abilene as you can in Mozambique.
Wow.
And so I think that shift is a continuous shift in my heart and just keeping my eyes on Jesus.
Yeah. So you came to Abilene, and you said you worked with the Iris branch, I guess that was here.
Yes.
So you were here, but then you would leave for like disaster relief. Tell us a
Yes.
little bit about that, and then we'll kind of transition to where you are today.
Sure. So I was a missionary in Abilene, which when I would tell people that, they're like, Abilene for sure doesn't need a missionary. I was like, yeah, you're right. Abilene doesn't need missionaries.
Even
but
though
they
if you do
also
the math, if you do the math, we have about maybe 20,000 people in our region that go to church consistently at all, which would be like twice a month. We have like 150,000 people in the big country.
Yeah.
So we have like over 100,000 people in our city who are not active in the church, they would profess to be followers of Jesus, but there would be no fruit of that. So Abilene could actually use more missionaries.
Even though it is in
definitely.
the Bible Belt, it could
Mm-hmm.
and does need missionaries.
I mean, I've done like gospel outreaches in Abilene, and people had never heard of Jesus.
Yeah.
Like in Abilene.
Yeah.
But when I wasn't in Abilene, I would go do disaster relief. We would deploy to different disasters. So I think in 2019, I deployed to like 7 disasters, which was a little rough.
When you say disasters, like
like cyclones. I deployed to Mozambique 3 times because they had 2 Category 4, Category 5 cyclones hit. And then I deployed to the Bahamas after Hurricane Dorian hit there. So mostly like hurricane cyclone stuff.
Yeah.
But then we also did some things in Guatemala after the volcano eruption and that sort of thing.
Man, so that went on for 3 years, you
I
said?
did that one for a year and a half.
Okay, that was for a year and a half. So, you're here, you're going, you're here, you're going. That could be its own podcast in and of itself. But then at some point, you felt the Lord calling you kind of out of that. Like how was that prompted? How did the Lord speak? What was that transition like? And how did you have to exhibit faith and trust in God pulling you what maybe seemed like off the mission field, overseas at least entirely?
Yeah. Well, if I'm really honest, I burned out pretty hard. I don't think that I understood what self-care should look like in a disaster zone. I don't know if anyone really knows what self-care should look like when you're in that many disasters, but I felt like the Lord, I think that in my life, whenever it's time to transition, I feel the grace lift pretty fast and it's time to transition.
Yeah.
And so that happened when I knew I needed to leave the airport job and it happened with the disaster relief. I just felt this shift that I just wanted to be in Abilene. Like I would cry.
Which is she would cry. I was about to say that thought would cause many to cry. That I feel called to Abilene, although I love Abilene and I bless our city.
When I was in Pemba, Mozambique, the first time, someone from Abilene came and spoke, and someone was like, "Kristen, you could work with Iris in Texas." And I said, "I will never move to Abilene, Texas."
Ooh, famous last words.
Yeah.
Never tell God you won't do something.
But it wasn't. But I realized near the end of my time as a missionary with the disaster relief, which it was a great organization, like the leadership was phenomenal. I just knew that I wanted to plant roots, and I couldn't plant roots with leaving for a month at a time every other month. And I would like cry when I would have to go on these deployments because I wanted to stay and do stuff with my life group, and I wanted to stay and volunteer at the pregnancy center and do all these things. And so in I think October, the Lord started kind of moving me towards stepping out of missions. And I talked to several different people. I talked to Jeffrey about it. I talked to a lot of my spiritual like parents and mentors, because I didn't want to make the decision out of burnout or out of haste. I wanted to really listen to what the Lord was saying. And so I made that transition out. And so now I work at Pregnancy Resources as the education coordinator, and I work at Front Porch Coffee as a supervisor, and I do weddings with Kendra Duke.
There you
Awesome.
go. So if you were going to, as we kind of wrap up, if you were going to give just a piece of advice, sounds weird, but something that you've taken from this life as like an active full-time missionary, that being your essential profession, to then taking something from that and walking it out in your day in, day out life where you're not a professional missionary, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
What do you have something that you feel like you've grabbed hold of from that then you walk in now, or you try to grab hold of, use now, or?
I think that's such a big question.
Yeah. That's how we like to end these.
Yeah. Well, one, I think that it is that love looks like something. I think that from a standpoint of how practically you can live your life, and practically what I've done is like to just try to love people in a very tangible way. But I think in a bigger sense, I think what I've really taken from my time as a missionary is, I'm going to cry, is just how worthy Jesus is. And I was reading in, I think it's Mark 14, about the woman with the alabaster box. And it says how she broke it on Jesus because he was worthy of it, and how it was very costly to her. And so I think what I've taken from my time as a missionary is I've seen people break their alabaster box for the Lord, and no one ever regretted doing it. And it looked different for everyone because it was, whatever is costly to them. But how we will wish that we did it more, I think, once we see Jesus face to face. And so I think that for me, living on the mission field and then coming back to America and planting roots here in Abilene, it's that every day he's worthy of us giving him all we have in whatever manner that looks like.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's
a good
so
way to
good.
end.
It is. I'm just going to sit on that.
Yeah. Think about love looks like something.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you,
That's so
Kristen.
good.
You're such a blessing. You're blessing our
Thank you.
church. Thank you for sharing your story. And
Yeah.
I know we could hear stories from life on the mission field, but I think honestly, it's as amazing as what God is doing all over the world. And I'm so glad we get to be a part of what God is doing in our entire world. I love that thought of even living on mission here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what the vast majority of all of us are going to be called to, is what does it look like to live on mission in the here. And
Yeah.
I've watched you do it. It's an encouragement to me.
absolutely.
And so thanks
Yeah.
for the way you live your life, and thanks for being on the
I was gonna
podcast.
say that's a lens that it's been fun to like observe you with people, interacting with people, because I know like every conversation, every interaction you have is through a lens of what we would call, mission or mission field. It's an opportunity to love someone, to serve someone,
Yeah.
and to tell of how worthy Jesus is. So thanks so much for your faith and how you walk that out. And like Jeff said, we're so blessed to have you as part of our body. And thanks
you.
for sharing a little bit of your story. I know we could have gone a whole lot longer, but we believe the Lord is moving in that, and it's going to speak to many people. I mean, it's speaking to me right now.
Yeah.
Even just wherewith I am today and what I'm trying to figure out. That's good stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Kristen.
having me.
We want to thank you again for listening today. Thank you so much. Remember, hit that subscribe button so that you can follow and be notified of each podcast that we release each week. And we want to remind you, if you're listening on the main Beltway feed, click over into, we're going to have notes on this podcast, and we want you to subscribe to the Beyond Sundays podcast. So we will move it over completely to that, away from the main Beltway feed after the first 2 or 3 episodes. So do that, subscribe to us. Thank you so much. If there's anything you need, reach out to us. We are here for you. We love helping each other take our next steps in our walk with Jesus. And one of the ways we do this is through story, through hearing of the God who did, still does. He's moving in power, and we want to experience that together. So hope you have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.